Hi, everyone. Welcome to Project Herpetoculture podcast. I'm your host, Roy Arthur Blodgett, and I'm joined as always by my intrepid co-host, Philip Leitz of Arids Only. We have an excellent show for you today, but before diving in, we'd have some brief housekeeping. So first, I'd like to thank Dylan and the Animals at Home Network for hosting our show. It continues to be a pleasure to be part of this platform. We'd also like to extend special gratitude to Charlie, who generously edits our audio and has done a lot to improve the quality of our show over time. And we'd also like to take a moment to tell you about our sponsors. So first, we have Custom Reptile Habitats, who have been with us since day one. They produce top-of-the-line PVC reptile enclosures, and I use them for a lot of the large format Vivaria here. They're also carrying universal rocks, misking products, and a bunch of other useful stuff. So if you're in the market for any of that and you're planning to make a purchase, consider doing so through the link in our bio or description. We'll receive a small commission at no additional cost to you, and that really helps us keep the lights on over here.
Up next, we have Fairy Tale Dragons. That's a joint venture between Heather Moy and Ron St. Pierre, both of whom have achieved legendary status in herpetoculture. They've accomplished quite a lot and produced some of the finest bearded dragons and taliqua in the country, alongside a whole host of other species such as emerald tree boas and green tree pythons. Check them out if you're in the market for any of that, and be sure to follow along with them on social media. They're always up to something interesting over there.
Next, we have Cold-Blooded Caffeine, roasters of delicious coffees from all over the globe. We have a private label with them, the PH Blend, which is a light roast coffee from Rwanda. It's a great choice for those who prefer a more floral coffee with notes of berry, but they have a wide variety of options for a broad array of preferences. So check them out. And if you place an order, don't forget to use the code PROJECTHERP for 10% off.
We're also very pleased to have the support of Exoterra, a brand that needs no introduction. It's safe to say that herpetoculture wouldn't be where it is today without the influence of Exoterra. For decades, they've been industry leaders in innovation, offering just about everything needed for reptile care, from diets and supplements to enclosures, substrates, and lighting. We're both big fans of their naturalistic terraria and substrates in particular. They have a lot of interesting products in the works as we speak, and we're really looking forward to seeing what comes next.
And next we have Tamura Designs. For those in the know, Tamura Designs is widely regarded as one of the finest enclosure manufacturers on the planet. They produce outstanding large format Vivaria with endless options for customization, drains, UV printed backgrounds, lighting rigs. On top of all of that, they also make amazing deli cup displays for expos and these incredible multi-unit condos, which I use here. So if you're interested in any of that and you decide to make a purchase, use the code Herpetoculture for 15% off one item as a special offer to our listeners only. We also have Happy Dragons. We're really thankful to have the support of Happy Dragons. They are producing some amazing content for bettering our reptile care. And we've been actually partnering with them to produce even more content like webinars. Also, the platform and subscription service offers breeder access to first clutches, things like that. We have online courses coming down the pipeline. In addition, we have live Q&As with reptile experts, such as Mariah Healy from Reptifiles. It's truly an outstanding subscription package that also offers discounts on their supply partners, such as Ovipost and Joss's Frogs. It's really an outstanding product. So check it out and let us know what you think.
And last but not least, if you're interested in supporting the show directly with something of a tip or a monthly donation, check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/projectherpetoculture. We have a monthly live chat there with all of our paid subscribers. That's been a whole lot of fun so far. We also have a whole line of merchandise like t-shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and more on our website. And of course, sharing the show with a friend, subscribing on YouTube, and keeping up with social media is always very helpful.
And with all that said, we're on to the show. Thanks, everybody. All right, everybody. This is Project Herpetoculture Podcast, episode number 83. I'm your host, Roy Arthur Blodgett, as always, joined by the dashing Philip Leitz, who we can't see on camera right now because he's stuck in traffic, but you'll just have to superimpose his handsome face in there. And we have an amazing guest today, and that's Myke Clarkson. Myke, how are you?
Doing great. Glad to be on.
Yeah, glad to have you. Usually to start out, we like to hear just a little bit about everyone's background. And so I'm curious just how did you start out in herpetoculture? How did you get
I
the bug?
wish I had a more exciting backstory. I really do. Like some people have such good backstories, and mine I could summarize quite simply that I grew up in Hesperia, California. And if you're like, where's that? Picture Arizona on the California side of the border, right? Wasn't much to do out there, but I was fascinated by nature. Of course, I was a dinosaur kid, and my parents kind of fostered that. I think I was probably 5 or 6 years old when my dad brought home the old termite display at the pest control office he worked at, and started populating that with lizards. And they'd let me keep them for a few days and then put them back. And slowly that gradually grew into them saying, "Oh, well, we can't get him to read the school books. He doesn't like reading." And obviously that's changed, if you see my background, for those of you watching my video. Then they realized that they could take me to the public library and I would rent the same snake books time and time again. And they could encourage me to actually do chores if they pay me a little so I can save up and buy snakes. And it started with the Florida blue garter snake and then a mall ball python, which dates me a little bit because malls used to have pet shops. And, how much that doggy in the window, probably a mall pet shop. That's how they drew you in, right? And in the very back, at the very back of the store, that's where the herps was. And that's where my first ball python came from, back when there was a reason you called them ball pythons. You'd ask to see them at the pet store and they'd pull this thing out and it went on ball the whole time you're there. Like you could take it home in a basketball holder and it wasn't coming undone. And, I remember accidentally spooking him and balled up. And I thought, is he ever going to undo? Quickly followed by my second ball python. And to date, the only ball python I still have is that second ball python I got at when I was 7 years old. And I think I went the regular kind of route that a lot of keepers go, right? Like I had a cap at home. I had to feed my own snakes. So quickly got odd jobs, working summer camps at a Boy Scout camp and all that kind of thing to just support it. But, there are no more than 10 snakes. Moved out on my own right after high school, graduate high school. And the next month was looking for an apartment. And, I guess kind of an early start to life, could have as many snakes as I wanted. And that's when I did that trajectory of like, you want bigger, you go through the retic phase, and then you want rare. And I think for a lot of us, you come back around and you go, what do I really like? What is really fascinating for me? And I've gone through phases. I did vine snakes, Ochula for a long time, Asian vine snakes, Oxybellus. Still fascinating to me, still maintain some of those. African cooler birds a while because I had good access. But I think throughout, pretty much, starting at 5 years old to then into adulthood, refining what I wanted to keep. It was always snake heavy. I also do some dart frogs. I've done some geckos here and there's some monitors, but really snake focused. But I've always really found a passion in pioneering species. And that might come from in my early 20s going to IHS and having people give talks about how they revealed the breeding habits of something, and now you could do it too. And I'm like, man, I want to be one of those. I want to be one of those people that cracks the code. I might just be an endless tinkerer. Like I get bored really easy. I wish I could probably actually one day see a profit breeding herps, because I have no problem breeding them. I have a problem with sticking something to long enough to where it becomes profitable, because once it becomes monotonous, I'm like, oh, well, that sucked. Let's move on. Yeah, that was a really long answer. I jokingly say that in the desert, when you grew up in the 80s, in the high desert, it was the only two things to do when you got to high school were drugs and ATVs. And the drug of choice there knocks your teeth out. And I liked my teeth. Still, I don't want to lose them. And my family didn't have the money for ATV, so snakes and lizards in the backyard. So, herping that graduated to herpetoculture, that graduated to, I now have 2 dedicated bedrooms and kind of the master bedroom as well that are just, filled with large enclosures and, my tinker space.
For sure. Yeah. I love that aspect, the tinkering aspect of herpetoculture. I talk about that a lot as just like one of the merits of herpetoculture. I think it satisfies this very human longing for adaptive management, for being in like a relationship with feedback with something, I think that
absolutely
there's a really good way to do it.
I got to admit, like I loved working with, they've changed Latin names like 50 times lately. So I'll say Mahalia capensis, but obviously they're now Limoforma, but let's just like, African file snakes, which is confusing because I work with aquatic file snakes as well, but I used to do a lot with Mahalia. And, I love them as animals in a captive situation for me personally. And it's not a dig at anyone, because I think like if that's your thing, they're awesome. And whatever your thing is, keep pursuing it. That's my biggest feeling on herpetoculture. Pursue what you're passionate about. Don't pursue what you think is the trend. Don't pursue what you think is the profit. Yes, you could do that if you're business, but pursue the passion, because that's where this all started. And that's the common thing we have is our passion, right? So for me, I lost the passion for Mahalia, not because the animals, but because there wasn't anything to do on a regular enough basis. Like they were so dialed in. It's like you fed them, you cleaned them, rinse, wash, repeat. You cooled them down a little bit in the winter. They bred, and they're they're not corn snake easy, but once you get them established, they're easy. And I hate to say it, but for me, that tinkering, that needing to check, that needing to adjust, that needing to read the enclosure and the animal and its environment, seeing if its comfort levels are what they normally should be, and figuring out those animal expressions. You know what I mean? Like mammals are easy. They grimace. But, when you're dealing with dart frogs and snakes that have absolutely no facial expressions, learning each species' micro expressions, the physical body language is fascinating. And when you have to go in there and it's vivarium or trimming plants, or it's aquatic snake doing, your water chemistry and checking on the fish and the invertebrates and all the layers that you've piled in this tank, sometimes unnecessarily, you get that closer contact where you develop that and you feel like you understand the animals, and you can walk by in a glance and go, I don't think they're happy. Once you hit that level, to me, that's the level I want to be with all of my animals, where I can glance at them, read them, understand them, and have that kind of connection with a piece of wildlife on a daily basis that you otherwise wouldn't have.
Yeah, totally. I completely relate to that whole arc. I'm curious, like when did aquatic snakes kind of enter into your kind of focus? Because I think of you now like as Myke Clarkson, aquatic snakes, and I know you've had other interests, obviously, like you've already spoken to, but that is a big one. And I'm curious, like, has it always been a big one, or when did it kind of take a central focus?
I think I have it over there. Yellow-bellied sea snake book, like from the library. I found it in, used book. And like, that's the book I used to get. I've always been fascinated by snakes conquering water as an environment, because here you have this apex predator that became perfectly evolved in land and said, water, let's go for it. And I just, every aquatic snake has a very special niche. It's why you can have 13 St. Patrick sea snakes in the same area, which is insane, but not when you actually look closer at the ecology. I like the very specialized evolutionary niches that each of them hold, and learning about that and having to dive in their environment. So it's always been an interest. In my earlier years, like I said, my very first snake, Florida blue garter snake, I did actually, when I was 5 years old, have a two-striped garter snake, which is now a species of special concern. So obviously not something I would, not something you keep now, but at 5 years old, that was a different situation. And then had some Nerodia. I had a large Nerodia collection. I didn't really have, in my early years, access or funds for aquatic snakes. They're not cheap. California banned Nerodia. I had to get rid of Nerodia. And somewhere around that time, in my early 20s, probably 2021, so really early 20s, I picked up my first truly fully aquatic snake. When I say I work with aquatic snakes, I mostly work with Homolopsidae and Acrocortis, which are neither technically colubrids. And so I think my first Acrocortis was an Acrocortis javanicus that I got at a reptile show in Victorville, large imported female. Quickly followed that up with the Homolopsis, and Philippe was a huge inspiration, because at the time Philippe was bringing a ton of different cool Homolopsis. I ended up buying his entire morph collection later on.
Cool.
And then I picked up a Filipino blue Acrocortis granulatus back when Acrocortis granulatus were imported as fish with coral. So even though the Philippines do not export land-based reptiles, for a long time, Acrocortis granulatus, because they were catching them in the ocean, were classified as marine-based. So you can get these bright black and blue marine file snakes. It's one of the really cool localities. Like I think there are 2, maybe 3 choice localities. Would be like North Australia, obviously can't touch those. The Philippines, the black and blues, can't get those. And the Indian animals, the animals out of India and Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's got a weird orange unicolor form, some awesome colors. You can't have any of it. It doesn't have them come in. But so that was kind of, and after I had all of the Homolopsis and the granulatus and the javanicus, I soon kind of maxed out my space. So I was in that same like half dry herp, half aquatic herp situation for a while. I moved to Hermosa Beach for 13 years. kept trying to add more. Eventually, I'm on an apartment building, like an older apartment building. You know, they call it a condo to me. It's like, I don't have my own house. It's still an apartment. Brutally expensive out there. That's why I moved back to the desert. Like, not worth it.
It's gnarly.
But literally, I weighted the enclosures down to the point that if you stepped in the middle of the room, it bowed a little towards the garage below me, and the water kind of would ripple. Reason number 2 to move is I didn't want to move my herp room down to the basement. I don't know why I have balloons right now.
That's awesome.
So move again, have to have a single story concrete floor. And now I have 2 rooms of aquatic snakes and have been able to significantly expand. I'd say the challenge working with any aquatic snakes is space. You know, they don't stack and rack. You know, you have a 150 gallon tank, that's a 40 gallon sump under there. So you basically lose the space of 2 tanks. And so even today, like, you know, I probably have the biggest aquatic snake collection in the country, but it's not that big because it's not that easy to put them into, you know, racked type systems. It doesn't work well.
Totally. Yeah. Definitely not the kind of thing you can just shove in drawers and check on once a week and all that kind of thing. A little bit more involved.
But at the same time, it's one of the coolest things about them, because I would say when you look at snakes, the snake that's closest to keeping dart frogs is aquatic snakes. And here's why I say that. I know that's a weird comparison. Everyone's like, what? Huh? No, they don't eat flies. Sorry. Wish it would be cheaper, right? But the reason is you have a layered environment when you do aquatic snakes. And you have a layered environment with frogs. You get your isopods, you get your springtails, you get other things in with the frogs, even small tropical geckos. If you have a big enough vivarium, you could really do a lot with frogs. And with most snakes, they're going to pummel the greenery, or, you know, it's not beneficial to them. Whereas if you're keeping tentacled snakes, keeping shrimp in there, they're always picking and cleaning up the snakes. It's actually great. You can't put catfish in there as bottom cleaners, but you have to treat aquatic snake care like you treat fish care, meaning you need your bottom feeders, you need your feeder feeders, you need your cleaners, and all of these layers, all these invertebrates, and the fish the snakes are supposed to eat, and the fish I really hope the snakes don't eat because they're cool and they're just for cleaning or some other purpose. You can really get creative with stacking layers. So yeah, you could rack them, but why? You're losing the entire joy of keeping them. And the other thing is, unlike any other snake I'm aware of, aquatic snakes live with their food. So all the predation you get to witness with an aquatic snake is so much closer to natural predation than you would have with a traditional terrestrial snake. Like, you know, you're not just throwing a rat in there and boom, gone, frozen rat. My snakes live with their food. You go in there at any night and you could watch natural predation because they have the ability to feed at their luxury. And that's something that's just, again, it's almost a little more dart froggy in terms of what the actual experience is. And I really am drawn to that with them. Yeah,
there's something about, like, I don't know, there's something we often talk about here of just like the kind of different motivations and like the different things that make it click for people in keeping. And it sounds to me like you are more on the kind of like behavior oriented side of herpetoculture, you know. Absolutely. And I totally relate to that, where some people are, it's just not necessarily the thing that makes them click, but I think that makes a lot of sense.
Some people's passion is to develop a new morph or prove something out, or, you know, and awesome. If you're pursuing your passion and you're pursuing it for a wholesome, genuine reason, that's just what fascinates you, do it. For me, my biggest joys in herpetoculture are when I observe something and then I go and I hit Google Scholar and I look every source I can and I can't find a paper on it. And I'm like, this is an observation due to science. And I've got a stack of those. So the only problem is I find the observation, I talk to some authorities on the topics. They go, that's not been observed. You should publish that. And then 2 days, I just sit on it. I should probably fix that. But like the stuff that we're observing in these aquatic snakes that usually live in a muddy environment, that like visual observation, like I'll tell you, as much as I love these animals and as much as I target them when field herping around the world, you really don't see much. You know, you can't sit there. Like, you see a clouded monitor. Like, I was just in Singapore and I spent like 20 minutes with the wife just watching a clouded monitor dig and pull prey. Way more fun to observe in the wild, because typically aquatic snakes, it's like mud and you see some movement. You're like, well, I'd grab it and bank it and take a photo on the shore because I'll probably never see it again if I don't. But in captivity, where the water's slightly clear and you have all the time in the world to watch them, you'll see things like caudal luring in species that wasn't known, or air sequestration. I've seen air sequestration in elephant trunks, where they take a big breath, they go back to their shelter, they exhale, they repeat, and then they breathe out the bubble they made. They basically know how to make scuba tanks so they don't have to expose yourself to predators. This is stuff
really
that's
cool.
unpublished. That's just, you gotta explore it in a glass box because that's the only way to. And that, for me, like you said, the behavior and observing the animals being the animals they are. If I didn't have that, I don't know if I'd be drawn to it, to be honest. I don't know if
I feel the same way. Yeah, I feel the same way. Well, okay, so for the listeners to know, we're a bit short on time, so we're kind of moving at a good clip here today. And one thing I'm curious about. No, you're doing great. You're doing great. You can talk fast. It's good. You can talk faster than I can.
A little fast, sorry.
No, it's perfect. I mean, you mentioned this observation of the clouded monitor, and I know you're a very dedicated field herper and that you've traveled all over the place for, production and working in television. You've seen a lot of herps in their native ranges, and I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to the merits of field herping for you, and also maybe you can share one field herping encounter that has just really stayed with you as just like a life highlight in that realm.
There's a few of those. So, obviously, like I said, I grew up in the desert field herping. Field herping, like if you ask me when I started, my mom has pictures of me like 3 or 4 years old in the backyard, like grabbing grasshoppers and side blotch lizards. So I don't know when it started. So it's always been a thing for me.
Totally.
But it transformed when it became international, I think. I was always passionate about it. I always liked it. But I think no matter who you are, unless you're the kind of person that can get really into you're a Rosy Bowl locality person and that's your passion. For me, I like variety. I like new experiences. I'm probably slightly ADHD squirrely. So, the second something becomes commonplace, it loses interest. It's a flaw. I realize it. So once my job in television started taking me around and every animal I saw was totally new to me, suddenly I was like, okay, huge shift. We're dedicating money every year to a little bit of travel just for herping. Because truth be told, honestly, my work travel, a lot of the time, there's minimal downtime to actually herp. And the further I've moved up the ladder, the less it's gotten. Right after IHS this year, I go from Knoxville IHS on a plane, and I'll be doing 6 countries back to back, and we'll be gone from the country for 8 weeks. Not staying home for 8 weeks solid, and that's honestly a short run. In terms of memorable herp experiences, I really have the Bushmaster in Peru was huge. Just one of those. But I kind of want to pick one that'll draw this all back in. And I think my first Acrocortis granulatus is a good one. So this was on downtime, right? And in TV, that means you don't have a job because there's no such thing as days off. You're either working or you're just unemployed. So it was a fun employed winter, which is typically December's down. And so I had all these airline miles from filming, I think it was Dead by Dawn, we had just finished, but I rack up the airline miles. So I have tons of free flights. I'm like, hey, let's go to Komodo. Let's go see Komodo dragons. My wife loves monitors. So that was high on her list. So it's nice. Cool, we'll do Komodo dragons. I hit up this ranger, the same ranger, if you ever go there's one dude you want to talk to because he's big into field herping and you can actually herp at night in the park. If you're just a tourist, you can't. And if you want to see the blue insularis, which is an incredible animal, kind of got to do that at night. So you kind of have to. So I hit him up and we set up, what was it, 4-day, 3-night package to do Komodo National Park. And there's Komodo, there's Flores, Rincha. And so we go, okay, we're going to skip Flores, going to hit Rincha first. Spelled R-I-N-C-A. So if you're wondering, it's just pronounced spell. And we're going around here Rincha, and I go, hey, quick question. What are the chances of seeing Acrocortis granulatus? Because I know they're here. I had a friend that came here previous year on a scuba diving trip and found one in the ocean in pulsing xenia, which to me, when he sent me that video, was so rad to see one in a coral I was familiar with. And he goes, hey, man, I've been a ranger here for 30 years. I've seen one in my life. Chances are pretty low. And I'm like, okay, I won't get my hopes up. We'll still see dragons. It'll still be cool. So we're walking around the island. We saw, the Deboya. A lot of cool stuff. It was great night herping. Lots of Cerberus, the dog-faced bacadams, the water snakes that are brackish. Lots of those. Love those. They're always in huge densities when you see them. And we're coming back to the docks. It's been a long night. Now, this is the same docks that earlier in the night I was watching manta rays from. So straight up ocean.
Wow.
And I see something moving. And at this point, my first granulatus, I don't know, was 2004. And this was 2018. So I've been keeping granulatus for a long time at this point. I was well familiar with their movements. But I'm also not an expert here, right? Anytime I'm internationally herping, you have to recognize that this is your backyard to them. Like when someone comes here and goes, is that a, and you're like, no. And you don't have a second thoughts doubt. You've been herping here your whole freaking life.
Right.
That's who you are in these foreign places. You always got to remember that, you are not the expert here. You might know a lot about the animals, but at the end of the day, in terms of what they're like experiencing, it's the person you're with. That's why you're with them. And he goes, no, that's not an acrocord. That's a Cerberus. I gave it a second look and I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's a Cerberus. And it's it's nighttime. Flashlight is refracting off the water. I could barely see what I'm looking at, but I thought I saw banding. So I impulsively, me being impulsive probably, jump off the dock into the water, decent drop, cell phone in my pocket, everything in my pocket, everything ruined, and hit the ground. Instantly realized how stupid this was because it's a bay, it's silty, and it's just a cloud of all the stuff I stirred up. I can't even see what I'm reaching for, but I know I need to start reaching because I think I land in the same spot. So I'm like frantically reaching, trying to find this snake. And it dawns on me, I'm in Indonesia. There is massive sea snake diversity here.
Yeah.
Best case scenario, the banded thing I'm grabbing for is what I think. Second best case scenario is it's a crate and it might just try to get away.
Yep.
But there's a few bad case species options where this is a very short vacation. We just got here.
Yeah.
I was already in it. I was already invested. Luckily, grabbed it, feel it, that raspy skin that feels like nothing else in the world. I was like both a sigh of relief and joy. Lifted up, just like that moment of that animal you've always wanted to see in the wild. And I like seeing animals in the wild that I've worked with in captivity because I feel like I learn more about them through that, right? Like I recently went to the Solomon Islands and spent a lot of time looking at Acrocortis granulatus there because there's things you can learn about their native environment. And I've actually changed their enclosures since that trip to try to take those natural observations and apply them. But yeah, that granulatus was a huge one. My lifer, yellow-bellied sea snake, which is on my arm here.
Yeah.
For those of you who can see the video, the tail actually is like a fingerprint, so that matches the lifer.
That's
it was a similar situation where I jumped in the water and it dove down and disappeared. And I was like, oh, where'd it go? And I'm not graceful, I guess. Like I clumsy bear in the water, more of a polar bear plunge, which is unnecessary. I need to work on that. But so I kind of fell into the water. I am a scuba diver, but that was not a graceful moment. Snake dives, and I'm like, where'd it go? Looking all around. Yellow-bellied sea snakes are not typically, very aggressive, but you could screw up, and they are particularly lethal. Depending on the studies, they land in like 4 to 7 drop for drop. Not that great a yield. You probably won't die, but you definitely could. And I've, pre-existing bite, pre-existing heart condition, and this thing just vanishes. I'm try to water turn. And as I am, then I feel something in my shorts because I'm in just board shorts. And I'm thinking, sea snake in the pants. Not where you want a sea snake. A lot of places you want sea snakes. Up the pants isn't one of them. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to slowly swim towards the boat. And hopefully he decides to go down and no further up because it's just like rubbing against my leg. And I don't like that. And then in my mind, that's the only thing that registered. Snake disappears and suddenly feel something in your pants. You're like, okay, that's not great. But then all of a sudden, I feel a couple stings. And we all been bitten by snakes. It doesn't feel like much at all. So I'm like, oh, man, this isn't good. And so get back to the boat. And as I start getting up, they're like, hey, did those jellyfish get you? And I realized that it had dove down. And the thing that was in my pocket was actually my camera that I had forgotten that I had a second camera in my pocket. And the kind of thick foam cord, it's about the same width as the snakes, was bumping my leg. And it was just the jellyfish stings. And then I'm like, okay, well, we got to go find another one because I scared that one off.
Yeah, love it.
We found 10 fish, so it's okay.
Oh, recovery. That's a good recovery too. 10. That's pretty nice.
I mean, the thing about Pelamis, and I'm just going to call them Pelamis because everyone knows them as that, but Hydrophis platurus is typically if you find one, you find 10 more. Like,
but Pelamis just sounds so much cooler.
Yeah, I like the word better. My company's called Pelamis Productions. My car license plate says Pelamis. I got Pelamis on my arm. Like, I'm going to keep saying Pelamis till I'm dead and no one remembers what he was.
That's fair. That's fair. Cool. Well, I want to give Phil. I want to give Phil some airtime here. He's finally with us in video form as well.
Yeah, so sorry about that, y'all. Yeah, I got caught up in traffic on the way home, and it's always like it's kind of a bad timing because I've been teaching this judo class on Fridays, and it just times at the ending, it always times with meeting up with this and then the traffic and whole thing. So it's not working out very well. But yeah, so I mean, as interesting as I love hearing about herp stories, and I could probably harangue you about that whole thing for another hour and a half because I'd rather get bitten by any, like I hate jellyfish. They're super cool organisms, but they kind of, oh man, I hate getting stung by jellyfish. I don't know what it is. It's just so uncomfortable. But I wanted to ask a little bit about sort of how you came to be president of the IHS, and how a little bit about how you came into that role. And then I have a couple other follow-up questions after that, but let's maybe just start there.
I think there was a clerical error, and I've just been writing it. No, I mean, honestly, I got to say, when the board first approached me, I think we were in Belize, IHS Belize, and they're like, "What do you think?" And I didn't have an immediate good answer for them. I was like, "Who has my same name?" Because for me, this is IHS, and IHS over the years, I don't think has talked about as much as it used to be. Because my first IHS overlapped my 2-year wedding anniversary, and my wife was like, "You have a chance to go to IHS. You need to go." It wasn't even like, "Oh, you better get me a good president." It's like, "No, you should go." So I've been attending IHS since I was 20 and just been an active part, saying, "Hey, can I help? What can I do?" I was the media director for a while, and the board approached me in Belize. And to be honest, to be asked to be the president of an organization that's been around longer than I've been alive. The first IHS was in 1976 when they first discussed leopard gecko breeding. People don't realize how many first breeding talks were held at IHS. It's literally an organization that herp shows exist because of IHS. The first herp show was created because IHS stopped herp trading. That kind of heritage, I never thought ever I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm an IHS president." And here I am. So, I don't know. I guess they just saw that I had a passion for the organization and feel strongly about it. And here I am. I wish I had some good merit story where I earned it. I'd spoken there a few times as a regular attendee. But at the end of the day, I think, IHS is the kind of community that if you show up and you're like, "Hey, I love this and I want to get involved," we'll loop you in. I mean, you guys know Zach Loafman, and same thing. He showed up. He's like, "I love this." And I'm like, "You want to come on board? You want to be a part of this?" Because we are a very team community driven organization. We definitely want to make sure that this is an open door. We're not the maybe academic prestige level of an Ixon Herps or a JMIH, but we're not strictly academic. And we're also not, a just herp talk symposium that, herpetoculture symposium there's many of. We're a mixed bag. We want it to be that a zookeeper, a professor, and just someone who really freaking likes rat snakes can all come together and share that common passion without your title or your background or your walk within the world of herps being a thing. And, honestly, when IHS started in 1976, I like to remind people that at that point, herper, now people argue, "Oh, herper's a herpetoculturist," or "A herper's a field herper." And people go back and forth arguing the origin and intent of the word. But the fact is they're both wrong, because the term herper started when a herpetoculturist was a field herper, because captive breeding didn't exist. And if you wanted herps, you caught them. That was it. Yeah. They were one and the same. And at the time, there was a gap between zoos and academia and herpetoculturists, field herpers. And these herpers, field herpers that were breeding, were unlocking secrets. They were figuring out how to successfully breed. And the zoos are like, "We want to dialogue with these people that know how to breed these things." And there was things that zoos knew that the keepers didn't know. And IHS was formed as a way to just exchange information before the internet, before Herper had 2 meetings, before, some of the divides that have developed over time, and I get it. Some academics really shun herpetoculturalists on the extent that they think like poaching. And herpetoculture is not perfect. There's definitely flaws we need to work on.
Neither is the scientific institution.
But none of us are, exactly. And I think to a certain extent, we got to remember that herpetoculture is the gateway drug to academia. And I say that because the other presidential hat I wear is HCI. And at HCI, Herpetological Conservation International, for those of you IHS, HCI, do I need like a spreadsheet? Is this bingo? What word are we supposed to be spelling here? No, but for HCI, we have the Michael D. grant. And one of the questions we ask our grant applicants all the time and we get 60 to 70 grant applicants a year. We get about 2 Michael D grants. We get the Voris grant for aquatic snake research. But with the Michael D grant, we ask, what got you into reptile conservation, right? Because that's important. What's recruiting people to conserve reptiles is important to conserving reptiles. And it turns out that 99.9% of the time, with the rare exception of, like, I think one answer said Steve Irwin, every other time, it's a leopard gecko, it's a bearded dragon, it's a corn snake, it's herpetoculture. It's those close interactions that make people look at the animals as more than just, you know, a predator with no thoughts, no social structure, no real advanced mental capacity. And when you work with them closely, you realize that all of these tropes, all of these kind of stereotypes, all of these common ways of thinking about these animals is crap. And maybe there's something more going on. And then you want to learn more. And then you want to start, and as you learn more, you become more fascinated. As you become more fascinated, you start learning about things that are not so great, about things that are diminishing, things that are going extinct, and suddenly you want to save them. But it all started in an aquarium, which is why I personally feel that ethical horticulture is a very important thing for conservation, in the sense that it is a recruiting mechanism that doesn't cost anything to academia. You don't have to fundraise to recruit people when they're naturally just coming to it because they found that path. And it's a very common path. We see this over and over and over again. And I think, again, IHS kind of embodies that unity, that these are connected fields, that these do share a common passion, and we should all come together, exchange, and share in a non-judgmental space. That was the longest answer ever. I am sorry.
No, this is great. No. Don't apologize at all. This is exactly what we want. This is amazing, man. It's way more. It's easier in some ways to curb someone who is verbose, which is great. I prefer verbosity, but it's easier to do that than it is to, like, extract stuff out of. Like, it's a lot harder to have to just pull. You know, so no sweat there. So you kind of said a little bit of this already and talked a little bit about this, but how has the IHS changed? How is its role in, you know, so you mentioned that it started as this way to bring, you know, the zoological and scientific institutions in the private sector together to share information and be this this sort of bolstering thing. And considering now that you're the president and you've been going to these for so long, can you talk about the way they've changed, you know, both in terms of how the symposiums themselves have changed, how the organization has changed, and how that its relationship to those two fields that it's intended to serve, the scientific and zoological and the private sector, how its perception and relationship has changed in those two sectors?
I mean, it's changed a lot in the long term. You know, early on, it was held at hotels and college campuses, and people brought their herps into their rooms and they'd exchange herps. And then they're like bringing a bunch of snakes. And back then, pretty much, you know, mix of venomous into a hotel and just the little drawer that no one ever opens, but there's like Gideon's Bible and the Cobra. You know, obviously the board saw that probably wasn't the best mix, shut it down. Wade Hill started the reptile shows. So that was like the first early change. It's also fluctuated throughout the years with its president. The president has the role of, you know, curating the talks, and you can sometimes have a program coordinator, sometimes you don't. I'm very hands-on with the talks. This year I brought in, our dedicated Herpetoculture Day, because, you know, when you have an academic president, it might skew more academic, a zoo president, but that's just kind of the ebb and flow that we see. In terms of long-term changes, I think it's hard for symposiums today compared to before. When I was going early on, you hit up the people that went to IHS and try to download their brain from what they learned, because the internet was in its infancy. Now that the internet is more advanced, I'll say, where you could easily get videos, and it doesn't take 10 days to download it on Napster, and hopefully you don't get a virus, everyone's got a cell phone, so everything's recorded, and you can just like record a video of an aquarium setup for someone and throw that online. It's changed a lot in those terms, because the necessity of in-person meetings isn't the same. The networking, I'd say, between academics and zookeepers and herpetoculturists is still very much the core. I mean, we have board members that are heads of reptile departments at zoos and heads of their departments at their universities, and just straight up herpetoculturists. So it is still a good blend. It's still that community. But what's changed is, I guess, the need to go to talks. But we haven't, adjusted what we do, because there is value in that Q&A, in that in-person experience, in that networking. And I think maybe what's changed is what people value in it. Because for me, I know personally that networking experience is huge. There's been IHSs where I hear a talk on SFD, and that's a thing I've been looking into quite a bit with the aquatic snakes, because they're super prone to it and they seem just default colonized by it. You could have captive bred animals born in a completely sterile environment, they have stress, and all of a sudden it's popping back up, and you're like, okay, well, they've not been exposed to it. What in the world's going on? And that's been kind of an ongoing study-ish for me, working with much more intelligent folks than myself and veterinarians that are more qualified, but assisting as I can, providing samples, providing feedback, and going to an IHS and having someone from the University of Illinois talk about SFD treatments and then compare notes and discuss what works for you and what doesn't, and both learning from each other and gaining from each other. Yeah, you could kind of get that on the internet between the memes and the arguments, but it's not the same in real life. And the friends and the connections I've made going to these meetings are things I personally cherish. They're my inner network. They're people I've known for 20 plus years that I know I can go to and go, hey, I got a crazy question. And they'll give me a crazy answer. And, you know, not to knock what the internet's brought to the exchange. It's not the same as in person. But overall, I mean, I think as an organization, our format has stayed consistent. We are a mix of academic talks. We have added things over the years. We're the only symposium with a junior herper program currently, which lets school-age kids present and get their foot in the door and get that kind of first taste of it, which is kind of awesome, right? Like fostering the next generation. We also have collegiate speed sessions. You know, when you're in your early college years presenting, you know, your abstract probably won't make the cut for something big like World Congress. And if it does, great. But oftentimes, well, we have shortened collegiate speed sessions to get you comfortable presenting and share what you found. You know, it's that all doors open policy that we've taken a step further in recent years that I'm really excited about. You know, there's some things we still want to do, but it all comes down to year after year, just bringing fresh ideas to share with people.
Yeah.
Damn. That's great. I somehow was very much expecting like, well, you know, change is super natural. And so here's all the ways I think there's been some fluctuation and it's totally because of these various reasons, but I love hearing that it, you know, still is, you know, sort of true to the core of what it was put in place to be. I mean, that's phenomenal.
I've got all the programs going back since 1976. And when I got them, someone actually gave them to me. I had a few and someone gave me the whole set. And I opened them up and I try to watch the trajectory of the talks. And like I said, you see a slight fluctuation. If you got a zoo guy there, you're going to have slightly more zoo talks. But that balance of kind of our three boxes, and I say three boxes, field herping's in there too. There's a few other things. Like if it's herp related, it's IHS. But like going through these old programs, I'm like, man, it's really cool to know that we've been able to stay, you know, true to our mission, which is this is where you share knowledge. Whatever your herpetoculture, herpetology, field herping, it's all IHS. And I like that. I like the mixed bag. Because for me personally, you know, I've co-authored a few scientific articles. I'm not a herpetologist. I've co-authored now 2 books. The aquatic snake book is on HCI's website now. If anyone wants the Bible of aquatic snakes, that's like 700 plus pages. It's pretty massive. But I'm not a herpetologist, right? I contribute because I think I should. At the same time, I'm a field herper. At the same time, I'm a herpetoculturist. I just checks all of my boxes. And if you're one of those people with varied herp interests, it's kind of nice to have that option of like, hey, I don't want one thing. I want Neapolitan ice cream.
Yeah.
I don't actually like ice cream. I just threw that out.
This is a little bit random, and I think it'll just take a second. But like, how do you have so many things going on? How do you keep your head on straight and stay balanced and you know, stay motivated? If you clearly have so much energy, are you just naturally a high energy person?
Lots of coffee. No.
Yeah. Lots of coffee.
No, I blame my mom's side of the family, the Latino roots. She's high energy, but the truth is, I am naturally high energy. I lived in Hermosa Beach for over 12 years, and not once did I set a towel down in the sand and lay down. I'm not someone who can really idle, and I wish I was into sports because it's such like a, hey, how's the weather kind of thing to know about. but I've never been a big sports person. I've never had these ancillary things. So for me, when I'm not working, I need to feel like I'm filling my time with something fruitful. It's just something within my personality. So I like to say I don't really actually have free time. I took from December to March off. I finished my last Netflix show last fall, got home, and then end of December until end of March was off. I didn't have a single day free. I was literally playing catch up on projects. And I don't know, I like to feel like there's some fulfillment in what I'm doing with my time, and I could get philosophical and go into every different way, what leads you to that kind of thinking. But at the end of the day, it's probably just who I am.
Okay. You are. Okay. Sweet.
And I'm a little hyper and I drink a lot of coffee.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm the same way.
Amplified a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. I just tone it up. I'm not even sitting still in my chair. That's not helping my.
I mean, I don't know how people do that. I'm the same way. I can't sit still, but.
If you call me on the phone, I guarantee you I'm pacing the house. I'm probably like walking around the herp room looking at stuff. Like the second I'm on the phone, I'm moving.
Oh, that's great.
We know you got to pivot to your next meeting here shortly. So we'll just do a couple last questions. One, I'd love to hear just like your I guess your pitch for this year's IHS. Like, where is it? I will be there, and I've already been kind of plugging it here on the podcast, but I think it's a little bit different to hear it from the president himself. So yeah, I'd love to hear your pitch for IHS this year.
I mean, for one, the location. I always love, one of the hardest things, I think one of the most time-consuming things with IHS as the president is deciding those locations because, for a lot of people, this might be their one vacation of the year. And this year's location is actually one I haven't spent any time in. You say Knoxville, and I think a lot of people forget, you're at the back door of the Smokies. The most salamander diverse place in the world. So for one, come to IHS, stay a few days, and herp an epic place, right? Like that's an epic spot to be. And I always, anytime IHS is going anywhere, I'm like, how's the field herping? And then add some days. And this trip, it overlaps my 20-year wedding anniversary. This is a recurring theme. So I probably won't be herping as much as I'd like to for marital bliss concerns. But it is Knoxville. It is the Smokies. That's one. For two, we have the dedicated advancing herpetoculture sessions, which is the second day, which is awesome because, IHS has always had herpetoculture, but we've never kind of categorized it. And the names we have are names you're definitely going to want to see. We got Zach from Joshua's Frogs. We got Wayne Hill. We have, Zach, Bill. I mean, there's some names on there that you're going to want to see and you're going to want to talk to and you're going to probably become friends with. I'm not pushing friendship on the speakers, but that's how it goes. You'll come and you'll spend hours talking to people about stuff you never knew about.
That's actually how everybody gets paid is by friendship. That's the like you have to.
It's fully volunteer. Maybe anyone on the IHS board. You certainly don't come out in the positive. At best,
it's a requirement. It's a requirement. Like if you speak, you have to make friends with everybody. You have to.
I mean. To each their own.
Let's at least try.
We have Bruce Means as our banquet speaker, which is
it's gonna be awesome.
Pretty, and I mean Bruce Means speaking about the last taping. You get the live version of the TV show. Come on, that's gonna be. And he has talked up this talk where I'm super excited. Our banquet speakers are always awesome. Last year we had John Murphy, who's a good friend, talk about his career. We've had Ron Whitaker. We always get great heavy hitters for our banquet speaker. And this year's no exception. I think Bruce is going to be an incredible speaker. Can't wait. And then we have the whole thing kicking off with Graham Reynolds, who's like the godfather of Caribbean boas. So, I mean, we're bookend with excellent talks. We have crazy great talks in between. We got the behind the scenes tour of the zoo, which I think a lot of people who don't know about IHS probably don't know about that. But after the Herpetoculture Day, that concludes, you jump on a bus and you get to see the brand new Zoo Knoxville herp display behind the scenes. And I can tell you, I don't know what's there, but we did behind the scenes in St. Louis and got to see Tuatara in the flesh. And how many people can say that? You get to see, their giant rows of hellbenders. Zoos behind the scenes, if you've never done it, are sometimes the coolest things to do because they have things off display that they're not allowed to display or too sensitive. and to see the inner workings of a reptile department, which is something we do at IHS. You know, I've seen the inner workings of a lot of zoos every year at IHS. And every time it's like, this is awesome. It will inspire you for ideas. And it's just, you don't have that access usually to do. It's baked into every IHS meeting. So that's it. That's a huge, huge plus there. And yeah, those are for me, my highlights. And I don't want to not mention any speakers, but I also don't want to do the list and leave anyone out. Go to the website, iherpsymp.org, simp with a Y. Short for symposium. I know it's kind of.
I'm a herpsimp.org. Is that what you said?
No, it's not.
I will have the link in the video description.
As I said with a Y. You know, I say I'm Myke with a Y, so I'm used to saying with a Y.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I was like awesome.
That's awesome, dude.
At least you won't forget the name, right? It's Herp. Simp, not simp. I'm, but I, no M, just I, simp.org. And we've got the whole schedule there. And you could check it out.
Yes.
And I need to go to this thing. And by the way, our registration now is way easy. You know, a lot of meetings have like this thing you have to print, you have to mail in. It's all online. You could use your credit cards. You could do it on your cell phone. So, you know, and early registration is ending in like a week. I think it's May 25th. So if you want the discount registration, no time like right now.
Yeah, don't waste. Don't jack around, people.
Phone lines are open.
Get in there.
Yep.
Man.
Okay.
Sounds epic.
You have time for one last question?
Yeah. We got it all the way up until 4:59 when I have to jump on the IHS.
All right. We got exactly 10 minutes. Okay, so we ask a question of all of our guests. It's our closing question for every show, and that is, why herpetoculture? And that could be, why do you do herpetoculture? Why does it matter? You know, why should we be able to do this thing in this time and place?
Well, I feel like this whole episode's probably been the longest answer to that ever. So
for sure, it's true.
Beautiful recap bookending. If this was a TV show act breakdown, we'll just make magic, right? But it comes down to the things we've discussed. You know, I think herpetoculture as a whole, its importance is that close connection to wildlife that will inspire next generation of conservationists, will get people to think differently of them. You know, I often use my animals as ambassador animals at schools and meetings. And I can't tell you how many people have been like, you know, I used to really hate snakes, but because of you, you know, I'm not going to go looking for them like you do, but I appreciate them and leave them alone. You know, and that all starts with herpetoculture, that outreach, that close personal connection. That's important. And I don't think we can afford at this stage to lose it, because these animals need spokespeople. They need ambassadors, you know? And I think maybe when you say what draws you to herpetoculture, maybe that's it for me. You know, this is a misunderstood animal that is misrepresented, and yet a perfectly evolved, amazing predator that we can have close interactions with. You know, it wouldn't be ethical to do the same thing with a lion or a tiger, but reptiles, you can do that. And you can also like see their lives. And like I said, that behavioral stuff, that for me is just watching the behavior of this misunderstood animal and understanding it for yourself, getting that first person perspective. You know, and I think another thing a lot of people don't consider is like, well, you can always go in your backyard and see them. And I'd say that's like, oh, look, I hate to sound like extreme Angelino. I'm not at all. But not everyone has the privilege. Yeah. Not everyone's as privileged to have wildlife in their backyard, right?
No,
straight up.
That's very true.
So herpetoculture is also access. You know, if you're like, well, why can't you just go find them wild? Quit being so privileged. Some people live in an inner city and they can't, right? Yeah. So I think it's multifaceted. There's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons for it. And you know what the reasons are against it? There's none on the big picture. The only one is its flaws, which are there. But that's not it as a thing. Herpetoculture definitely has, you know, am I saying that there's unethical keepers? Oh, no, there are. Is there poaching? Yeah, there still is. And that's not herpetoculture's. Those are the herpetoculture as a whole. Those are flaws within it that we need to improve. As a whole, it is a gateway drug to conservation. It is a connection for inner city kids they wouldn't normally have. It's a way to observe them we never could. And it strengthens people's connection or creates people's connection to nature. It gives us ambassador animals. It gives us a way to missionary to other people why reptiles are cool. There's so much going for it. And for its flaws, everything has its flaws. We just need to, as a community, work to improve. And we have so much. And I think that's the greatest thing about herpetoculture is that, you could trash it today, and a lot of people like to. And I see that, but it's like, man, if you were back in the 90s, it was hot rocks and astroturf, because that's all we thought they needed, right? We've come so long. Now talking about doing UV for things other than lizards, I think we need to focus a lot more conservation-wise and herpetoculture-wise, and really across our whole world anymore, on the positive things. Is 2024 the greatest year you've ever lived in? Probably not. But think about all the positive aspects. Think about how far we've come. There's always stuff you could pick on, but as a whole, we've come a long way, and I can't wait to see where we go.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Very well said, man. It's a great answer. Well, where can folks find you if they want to follow along with your work, with what you're doing? I know you're on Instagram, right? And Facebook. I'm
on Instagram and Facebook. I'm not really on Threads or Twitter much, or X, but just my name, Myke Clarkson, like Kelly Clarkson. No relation. On Facebook and Instagram. Those are pretty much. I try to share a lot on there.
Kelly with a Y. Damn it. That's so stupid.
But yeah, social media is where you could keep track, because I like sharing my experiences because people enjoy it. It's the same thing. Like, not everyone can travel, so if I share my travel, they get to enjoy the same thing I enjoy. And then obviously, like we said, not what Phil said, but I herpsim. And then for HCI, go to herpconservation.org. So herpconservation.org for looking into all that stuff. iherpsimp.org for the symposium, or catch me on social media. And by the way, if you send me a friend's request and I don't accept you, it's not personal. They cap you at 5,000, so I have to delete people and add people. So you might be sitting in Facebook purgatory for a while, but I'm not ignoring you. I'm probably full.
Yeah. No worries. No worries.
Well, I'll make sure we have links to all that stuff in the show notes for everybody. So
awesome. Yeah, I do have a personal website, but it sucks. So don't send anyone there. It's like a mess. I don't even bother with it anymore.
Okay.
Don't go to Mike's personal website, people. Don't do it. It's not worth it.
All right.
All right. Well, we'll have to do this again sometime, Myke. Thanks for all your time. We appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you at IHS, man.
Sounds great, man. Look forward to seeing you there.
Sweet.
All right.